Hi guys, Alex again. Fred, I just saw your video. Thank you for the shout out, much appreciated. I just wanted to go through a handful of records I've been playing lately. We've all been going through the 1970s kick lately with the 70s threads. So actually a lot of these are more recent stuff, 2000s, 90s, 80s. So let's get right to it. First one I got here is by a producer from Manchester. His name is Andy Stott. Electronic, techno, dub, ambient, experimental, all of the above. Really one of the best electronic artists working today. He's absolutely fantastic. This might be, his best record. The bass on this is fantastic. Super heavy. There's some sparse vocals, some ambient pieces. It's highly recommended. Double LP. The label is Modern Love. It's Andy Stott. Very good stuff. Second one, also from the UK. These guys are from Bristol. It's a duo. I think the first stuff they came out with is under the name The Fuck Buttons. That was more, guitar heavy, synthy, pretty heavy stuff too. But this project is more like industrial techno, still kind of heavy, ambient. Tough to describe, but really excellent record. Fantastic artwork on this one. This is on the Sacred Bones label, which has really been putting out some excellent stuff the last several years. Next one here is by Jim ORourke. This is on the Drag City label out of Chicago. Jim ORourke, mostly known as a producer, has worked with Sonic Youth, Stereolab, Wilco, Joanna Newsom, basically a who's who of 90s and 2000s, artists. This is a solo record. I think it's from 1997. Sort of in the vein of the John Fahey record that I showed during my first video. This is all guitar work and layered, droney, really well recorded, really excellent record, instrumental, just acoustic guitar. Very good stuff. I recently picked up this first pressing of the Pixies' first EP, Come On Pilgrim, on 4AD. I wasn't too familiar with this one. I'm a big Pixies fan, but didn't know this one too well. Excellent stuff. Pretty raw, although it's actually pretty well recorded. I don't know if Steve Albini worked on this one, but yeah, it's definitely a very good listen. A couple of tracks have a lot of Spanish vocals, which it's pretty common later on, but very good. Next one is DJ Shadow, Preemptive Strike. I think this is sort of a compilation that came out from a lot of his early singles. DJ Shadow, otherwise known as Josh Davis, I think originally from the Sacramento area. I pulled this one. DJ Shadow was actually here locally he did a little pop-up meet and greet, and he was selling some of his own records from his own collection, and he was there signing autographs. And as you can imagine, in LA with the number of DJs that are here, it was quite a crowd. Got to shake the guy's hand, and Unfortunately, I didn't bring this one to get it autographed. I kind of regret that. But if you haven't heard this one, if you're not familiar with DJ Shadow, he's basically, I think he was described at one point as the Jimi Hendrix of the sampler. And he's just an amazing sampling-based instrumental hip-hop genius. Good stuff. Along the same lines, the Avalanches. There's another classic of the sample pastiche, genre. This one was recently reissued. The originals were getting pretty expensive. This is the Avalanches Since I Left You. I think it came out in 2000 originally. Really nice repress. Another one that, if you're not familiar, it's a must hear. Next one, I guess this came out for Record Store Day in 2015. I just saw it for like $10 recently, sealed. I don't have a lot of early 70s Sun Ra, and this was really, really outstanding. It's definitely very, very experimental. Highly recommended session. This was recorded at the Maison de la Culture in Amen, France, 1973. I don't think this was ever released prior to 2015, so very cool one. I know Fred recently showed a reissue or a record by Shu Shu, who was commissioned to record the soundtrack for Twin Peaks. So when he showed that, I pulled out my couple of Shu Shu records. This is one of the first ones. Kind of a cool like newspaper cover art. I think this one and this one, Fabulous Muscles, are probably two of his best. They're both excellent, experimental, indie, really cool percussion. He used a lot of unusual percussive instruments like bells. He plays a lot with volume, so there'll be very soft passages, and then he'll kind of stun you with some loud noise, guitar and percussion. He's got an excellent voice, an excellent band live as well. Shu Shu, the leader is he's openly gay, which I think it really does bring a fresh perspective to his music. He plays a lot with the concept of masculinity, and I think he's definitely an artist to watch for if you're not familiar. I was in the Bay Area for work recently, and I was very happy to find this original pressing from Unwound. This is Challenges for a Civilized Society. I think this one came out in 96, I think, on Kill Rock Stars. Unwound, fantastic post-rock band from the northwest of the U.S. A lot of people consider them, one of the best bands of the 1990s. But of course, overshadowed by a lot of the more popular grunge acts. These guys bring a lot of the same elements, but I think they're more experimental. Um, it's a very, very interesting band. Definitely another one to check out if you're not familiar. A couple of years ago, Indian Records, which is like an archival record label, that originally put out a bunch of stuff, I think in the 70s, that basically documents the music of a bunch of American Indian tribes. A couple years ago, they basically reissued about 25 other titles, and they were offering them all in one package for something ridiculous like, you know, $50 or $60 shipped. And so I definitely jumped on that. Have not gone through all 25 records. I've gone through, you know, maybe 6 or 7. They all have incredible cover art, as you can see, and they're really well recorded. Like I said, they're not only historical pieces, but they're very interesting musically. You know, certainly if you're into, you know, repetitive, percussive, immersing music, all of these records are absolutely amazing. Definitely check them out. I think, you know, most of these are now out of print, but you know, you should be able to find them, you know, relatively cheaply still. This one, definitely a recommendation from Fred, Floating Points by Alina, Alina by Floating Points. I was blown away by this. It really is fantastic. I think, Fred, you kind of compared them to a modern version of Talk Talk. You know, for me, I kind of heard it more like a Radiohead, sort of early 2000s Radiohead instrumental record. You know, the drumming reminded me a lot of O'Brien's drumming on some of the Radiohead albums. You know, on Radiohead's Kid A, there's a lot of jazz elements that are maybe not so obvious initially, but that's kind of what it reminded me of a lot. And I'm a big Radiohead fan, so I really like this record. I think it could be a classic. The Residents, a band that amazingly I only found out about it fairly recently. I've been, you know, looking for a lot of their stuff. Heard most of it online. It's incredible. It's a fantastic band. Very, very, very experimental. This one I also found on my Bay Area trip recently. This one is from, I think, 1981, 82. So again, on Ralph Records, which, you know, put out a bunch of the Tuxedo Moon records as well. This is, I think most of their albums are sort of concept albums. This is no exception. This one's called The Tune of Two Cities. And what it says here is it is the second part of the Residents' Mole trilogy, which began with The Mark of the Mole. The first LP is an elaborately told story of political and social struggle. Two Cities is a documentation of the music of these two different cultures as they were before fate threw them into turmoil. The tracks on this record alternate between societies. First one culture, then another, making its point not just by what is said, but by the listener's willingness to understand the globe-wrenching power of difference. Sounds pretty ridiculous, convoluted, and pretentious, but and actually the cover art is kind of atrocious too. But once I put this on, I was pretty blown away, and you know, you really can hear the alternating difference between the tracks. So, you know, the first track will be in one style and the next one will be in another. I would say, you know, like half the tracks are very primal, maybe kind of similar to what they did in their Eskimo record, and then the other half is more melodic. Very, very good, very interesting listen. And the last one was a recent find. Stumbled upon this first pressing of this classic, you know, Sonic Youth record, Dirty. I'm actually not. I wasn't really. Didn't really have a deep relationship with a lot of the 1990 Sonic Youth records. I'm a huge fan of the late 80s. You know, Daydream Nation, of course. You know, being the most famous. And then I kind of got into them in the early mid 2000s again. And so, you know, some of the 90s records I had on CD and sort of been rediscovering them. This is a double LP, and it's, you know, every single song here is absolutely fantastic, essential. All right, that's all I had for now. Thank you everybody for watching. Appreciate the comments. Take care.